Okay, we're going to do gathering now. It's not very hard, but it is a little tedious, a little time consuming because of the steps that we have to use. Let's say that we wanted to gather this piece of fabric, okay, onto this piece here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a basting stitch. Okay, remember that's the very longest length stitch on your machine. So you want to set the stitch length correctly. And what we do is we go ahead and put that right along the seam line. So 5/8 of an inch in, and we do not backstitch. Okay. And the other thing we want to do is we want to leave some nice long tails of thread because we're going to need to pull that to do the gathering. So I'm going to snip that. You can see I have a nice long tail of thread here. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do another row of basting about a 1/4 inch away from my first row. So instead of on the 5/8 mark, maybe on the 3/8 mark. Okay, and again, I'm going to start at the very edge. I'm not going to backstitch. I'm going to put my row of stitching in. And take that out. And these are my basting stitches. Okay. And I will show you how to put those onto the fabric. Alright, let's say for instance that we wanted to have gathering in a certain place on this. And let's say that we knew we needed to gather between this pin and this pin. Okay. Now what's going to be important is finding our center mark there. So I'm going to fold those two together and I'm going to again mark the very center with another pin. Alright, straighten that out a little bit. So my gatherers are going to start here, this is the center, they're going to end here. So on the piece that I have just prepped with the stitches, I also need to find where my center is. Okay, so that would be pretty simple by folding it together. Again, I'll take a pin, I'll just mark that spot, open it up. Again, I'm going to straighten out my pin a little bit. Okay. Now, I'm going to pin this piece onto this one. Okay? But again, remember, right sides together if we're going to stitch these later on as a seam. So, let's line these center marks up. I'll go ahead and put my pin there. I can take the back pin out, I don't really need it anymore. And since my gathering is going to go from this point, that's where I want the edge of my fabric to be. So I'll go ahead and move this pin in. So that looks like that, and I've got this big loop here. Alright, this is going to do the exact same thing on this side. Okay, that's the edge where I want that to be. And again, I'm going to put my pin in to hold it in place. Now what we have to do is we have to pull our threads so that our gathers end up pulling this fabric in close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to take the top 2 threads from when I stitched that on the machine. Okay, remember we've got bottom threads and top threads. And I'm going to, with equal amounts of pressure, I'm going to pull on the 2 at once. And I'm going to pull until that gaping part of the fabric meets flush with my back piece of fabric. Okay. Now, to keep this from ungathering or pulling out as I'm working with it, I'm going to make a figure 8 with my threads over that pin. Now I can come back through either with my fingers, or I can even take another pin and I can adjust my gathers. Because you always want gathers to be adjusted evenly. You don't want a big globby spot of gathers and then no gathers beside it. And now I'm going to go ahead and pin that into place. Then I need to do the same thing on this side. So once again, grab those top threads. Sometimes it's easier to get them loosened with a pin to start with. Okay, get them separated from those back threads. Okay, get a hold of them both and pull. And again, don't pull too tight, but you want to make sure that it's nice and flush and flat. And again, figure 8. And see how all my gathers are really pushed way over here. I want to scoot some of them back this way. So like I said, taking the point of a pin works really well for that. And then I'm going to pin them in place. Okay, if we just went to sew these right now, our sewing machine could actually push our gathers into a bad spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand baste them into place first before I machine stitch. You always want to do that with gathers. So I'm just taking a needle and thread, and because I really want to hold these gathers in place, I'm taking smaller gathering stitches, or smaller basting stitches I mean, with my basting thread. And again, my basting thread is another color that I'll be able to distinguish from my fabric and from my real thread, which of course would probably be pink if I were really stitching this for a garment and not for sample. And I just take it out to the edge here. Remember, I don't have to backstitch. In fact, I'm not even going to take that little backstitch to hold it into place. I'm just going to snip it. Okay, because I'm going to be taking this out pretty soon. Alright, and that's going to hold that in place. In fact, I could even pull my pins out now if I really wanted to and just have the basting stitch holding it. Sometimes I go ahead and keep them in though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this down as if I'm stitching a seam. So again, we're going to back stitch first to the edge. Alright, and now I need to stop and lift my presser foot. My needle's down in, so my gathering in my garment can't shift, to take my pin out, because that was really, really close under there. Okay, I want to make sure I'm not stitching over my pins. Okay, again, I'm going to pull the next one out, continue stitching, make sure I'm at my 5/8 inch mark, continue stitching, maybe even hold my gathers down a little bit lower over here with my left hand, and take my final pin out, come to the edge, and backstitch once again. Alright, then again I want to trim all of my threads. There are a lot of threads going on here, so you want to make sure you see what's what. And if I can get into my basting stitch, I can pull that out now. That's that lighter colored thread. And let's see which end this is. Is that my knot end? Okay. If I can get a hold of it down at this other end, I should be able to just take it and pull it out like that. And what I can do now is I can go back and I can trim off all of these stitches. The end of the basting stitches that were my gathering stitches, go ahead and trim all of those away again so they're not getting caught in any other seams that we may be doing with the garment. Go ahead and gather them all on this side. Cut those off pretty much flush to the edges. Okay, this is what the back side of the gathering would look like. And if I turn that over, that is what my front side would look like. Okay, so just as if it was gathered on to the front of the fabric there. So that is, and if any of the stitches showed from the inside, these original gathering stitches, you can pull those out too. I'm going to leave those in for sample purposes. So this is how we do our gathering.